on this host territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, and to be joined by my brothers and sister from Treaty 6 and Treaty 8 territories. We're here to provide comment on Bill C5 and the ongoing, as we speak, Prime Minister's First Nations Summit currently taking place in Gatineau, Quebec. I haven't personally attended this gathering, but I have spoke to various leadership. What I've been hearing from that First Nations leadership is not positive. It is not, according to their words, consultation. It's not even engagement. So this press conference is to share with you a perspective from First Nations leadership, rights holders, people who represent the grassroots and communities across this country, and for you to hear their perspective on what has taken place here in Ottawa. So with that, I hand it over to leadership.
I am Chief Gary Lehman from Beaver Lake Cree Nation in Treaty 6 territory. Will we be introducing ourselves?
You go.
Okay. We are here as sovereign treaty nations, not stakeholders, not lobbyists. Our treaties are not symbolic. They are living, binding agreements between nations. Bill C5, the so-called One Canadian Economy Act, was rammed through Parliament without our free, prior, and informed consent. That is a violation of constitutional and international law. We stand here today on the strength of our ancestors as sovereign treaty nations with responsibilities rooted in sacred agreements with the Crown. I speak today not only as a chief, but as a treaty holder, entrusted with upholding our responsibilities to the land, our people, and the sacred treaty relationship. I'm also here to speak for the unborn, the water and the lands that we have a sacred relationship to ensure we speak for them. Our treaties are not symbolic. They are foundational constitutional agreements. We did not cede our lands nor our authority to govern ourselves. We are here to make it clear. We oppose the so-called First Nations Summit with Prime Minister Carney regarding Bill C5, the One Canadian Economy Act. This summit does not reflect proper treaty-based engagement, nor does it uphold the honor of the Crown.
Good afternoon. My name is Chief Phyllis Whitford. I'm with the Ochese First Nation in Alberta. I am also a part of the Treaty 6 territory. I again acknowledge that we are here in Algonquin territory. I wanted to speak on a couple matters. One, needing to reiterate that we are here for the purpose of our children, for the purpose of our families, the purpose of our determining our, a future for the unborn. Just a few things I wanted to reiterate. One of them being the challenges that led to coming to this summit and the way it was organized. The meeting was organized last minute. The meeting, it also had no meaningful consultation. with any of the treaty chiefs across the nation. We were not invited through appropriate protocols. Instead, groups have been handpicked. From what we see and from what we hear, this is a predetermined process. A process that is disrespectful, top-down, and divided Indigenous leaders by privilege, by privileging some voices over others. This summit is a political theater, last-minute invitations, last-minute agendas. No advisors have been allowed. And in closing my remarks, I just want to say that the chiefs across this table have communicated, have had continuous dialogue to ensure that our voices are heard, our children's future is protected, and that we continue to protect our inherent treaty rights. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Chief Vernon Watchmaker from Kihiwan Cree Nation in Alberta, Treaty 6. I'm glad to be here today. I want to give an acknowledgement to Senator Prosper for providing us the time to, I guess, express our concerns and being there as lending his time the way people that are here in Ottawa, the MPs, to have the time for us to properly listen to our concerns the way it should be. I just want to bring up some concerns regarding C5, the One Canadian Economy Act. This bill claims to include First Nations in a unified economy, but in reality, it undermines treaty and inherent rights by assimilating us into a system we did not create or consent to. It also centralizes economic decision-making in Ottawa while sidelining treaty nations' jurisdictions and economies. The legislation frames us as stakeholders rather than sovereign partners. This is unacceptable. Bill C5 centralizes power in Ottawa, lets cabinet override environmental laws, and ignores treaty and inherent rights. That is not modernization. It is colonization in 2025. As well, removing the Indian Act from Schedule 2 does not fix this bill. FPIC is still absent, environmental protections remain vulnerable, and Canada can still override our jurisdiction under the guise of national interest. This legislation creates regulatory chaos. It will lead to more court battles, not fewer. It'll scare away investors because it strips away legal certainty. As well, the danger of legitimizing a flawed process as we are currently in. Participating in this summit would lend legitimacy to an illegitimate process. The Crown is attempting to fast-track policy that impacts us without our free, prior, and informed consent. That is built into the treaty-making process and under international law. A few invited voices do not speak for the treaty relationship or the diverse nations across Turtle Island. Thank you.
My name is Sheldon Sunshine. I'm chief of the Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation. I'd like to acknowledge that we're on Algonquin unceded territory. Again, also I'd like to thank Senator Prosper for organizing this event and allowing us an opportunity to speak to some of our challenges. I'd like to speak to some critiques of the Indigenous Advisory Council. I'd like to raise deep concerns about the Advisory Council and how it was created, how it functions, how it is being used to undermine the authority and the voice of treaty nations. The Indigenous Advisory Council is being formed without the free, prior, and informed consent of treaty nations. It is not mandated by our people and its members, or nor it represent our treaty governments and traditional governance systems. The Advisory Council will be used by the federal government to manufacture consent on legislation and policies that affect all Indigenous people, including treaty nations. Government officials point to the Advisory Council to claim that Indigenous leaders support legislation like Bill C-5, but this is misleading and dangerous. A small group of hand-selected advisors cannot speak on behalf of hundreds of distinct nations with sovereign governance structures. The Advisory Council is not grounded in treaty relationship. It's a colonial construct created by the federal government to advise Crown ministers, not to assert nation-to-nation or treaty-to-Crown dialogue. Its existence and operation undercut our treaty rights by placing our futures in the hands of an unelected body that reports to the Prime Minister's office, not to our people. It is used to divide and dilute Indigenous voices, creating the appearance of inclusion while excluding those who assert their inherent and treaty-based jurisdictions. It creates internal tensions, pitting Indigenous people against one another in a government-defined framework. We call for a respectful nation-to-nation dialogue. We remind Canada that our treaties are sacred covenants, not bureaucratic checkboxes. Our treaties are about sharing, not surrender. We did not cede the land. Our sovereignty cannot be legislated away by Canada. The United Nations already told Canada that FPIC is a legal obligation. Amnesty International has condemned this bill. Canada is on the wrong side of history. Any discussions about national legislation affecting our rights must be treaty-based, transparent, and mutually agreed upon. We demand a separate formal treaty table that respects our inherent governance systems and treaty law. In closing, we will not be silent about our treaty rights as they are bypassed and our voices ignored. We are not against dialogue. We are against unilateral decisions that are made about us, without us, and pretends to include us while eroding our sovereignty. Treaty is not a roadblock to development. It is a foundation of this country. If Canada continues to undermine treaty, it undermines itself. Thank you very much.
That's Anin. Joey Pete, Sunchild Chief. I just want to reiterate and want to thank you for setting everything up for us and to my colleagues across the table. And as a reminder, across Turtle Island, that we are still here. We never cede and surrender our lands. We are the title holders of the lands, the resources, the economic sharing should have been done at the beginning of time. And our message to Canada, we will not allow one Canadian economy act raise our rights, our lands, and our futures. So we stand united. Our message to Prime Minister Carney is to withdraw Bill C-5 and come to the table in a manner that respects the spirit and intent of treaties. That's why we stand in solidarity. Yesterday, we issued a press release and called on Canada to do the right thing. Immediate cessation of unilateral actions under Bill C-5. All plans and discussions related to the exploitation of resources within our territory or the takeover of our lands must halt immediately. Respect for our sovereignty. Governments must recognize and uphold our inherent rights, sovereignty, and jurisdiction over our lands and resources, and stop using one-stop shops in place of true consultation. Consultation is always a huge issue and factor in everything that is rolled out by the federal government. For example, yesterday the agendas were changed 4 times. No consultation given to us First Nations, yet we come many miles to sit in the same room, not to be heard. Our sovereignty must always be respected, and genuine, meaningful engagement should and must continue. And all future discussions impacting our territories must involve our nations directly. Canada should go to First Nations individually, not to organizations, because we all speak for our people, our children, our lands, our water, our animals, our medicines. International standards are not up to par with our standards, but yet we continually be overlooked and walked all over. Where's the reconciliation in all of this? Look what happened after the king left. 10 days later, Bill C-5. Where's the consultation to our people, to treaty? Our people are already suffering. Meanwhile, there's lack of consultation everywhere. Each and every day we are not consulted. We want engagement. We're not trying to halt engagement, but we need to work with a unified front with all First Nations, especially Treaty 6. We need to continue to remember we are the land. Without us, what is Canada? What is treaty without us? Carney needs to remember treaty was here and is still here. It's still alive, still breathing, still talking, and it will always be here. As long as we are here, treaty will always be here, because we never sold the land, and we are the land. Hi, miigwech.
Thank you, merci. If you allow, we'll go to the question period now. Please say or precise who your question is directed to, if possible. So we'll start with Catherine Lévesque, National Post. Do you have a question, Catherine?
Thank you very much, Senator Prosper, and thank you for all the chiefs for being here. My questions would actually be directed to any chiefs who were actually in the meeting. I just wanted to get your impressions from the meeting with the Prime Minister, and do you feel that the Prime Minister actually listened to the concerns?
I was here. I'll answer. Thank you for that question. Yeah, I think I hope that the Prime Minister listened. There was some passionate discussion going on, especially when Ovid Mercury spoke. that is a feeling of most First Nations all across this territory. And, you know, some of those discussions that have to have within government officials to help them understand the challenges that we face. And as we see this this summit, as they call it, put together, and the ongoing changes to the agenda and all of those things, it really leads a sour taste in my mouth. We've come here. We come here with good intentions, you know, come here in good spirits, hopeful, but moderately reduced expectations. And we're going to leave with even further reduced expectations.
Obviously, we weren't in the room, so if you could describe what was those passionate comments, I would really appreciate it. And you know, what was there a consensus in the room as to how you should move forward with C5? Because clearly the Prime Minister says that he's not going to withdraw it, he's not going to amend it.
Yeah, I'll start with Mr. Carney's comments to open the meeting. You know, it was all a lot of good intentions about all the good things that the One Canada Economy Act is going to bring. You know, it's going to bring us together. It's going to bring all of these things. It's going to drive up our economy. And yet, that's something I liken to around treaty making. They come with all the good things. And they never talked about all the bad things that were going to happen with treaty. So, and that's how I see things when I come and have these discussions. You talk about these legislations that are affecting us, that are going to affect us long term. With that always in the back of my mind, you know, we promise all the good things it's going to bring, and yet we're always looking for what's really behind the intent. And really, after today, seeing what I saw, I can see the history repeating itself with this legislation. It's not going to be favorable for First Nation people as it currently sits. Regarding the comments by Ovid Mercury, he was being honest and truthful about our history and a reminder to Canada of the obligations under treaty, and the atmosphere in the room, everybody supported what he said. There's people standing up, applauding him at the end.
Next up, Carl Mayer, Narwhal.
Hi, Carl Meyer at the Narwhal. Thanks for talking to us. Can you talk about how you see Bill C5 affecting oil sands projects, in particular the Pathways Alliance project? The Energy Minister has said he wants it built. The Prime Minister has talked about exporting decarbonized oil. I know a number of affected First Nations have raised concerns about it, in particular after Alberta said they wouldn't do their own provincial assessment, and now potentially the possibility of avoiding some federal requirements.
I'll speak to that if no one's got it. You know, that major project up in, well, I'm not very familiar with the Pathways project, but, you know, in terms of speaking to that oil sands project, I do know some of the impacts of some of the communities downstream from that project. And speaking to the consultation process for Alberta, which is deficient in my eyes, and then we actually have two systems. We have the provincial system and the federal system, and they're both failing us. You know, we have, speaking with Chief Tuckrow, he's got rare cancers as a result of living downstream of those oil sands. And some of those challenges that they face are very, very difficult to hear when I hear about him, about talking about his people. And now that we're going to go to a one process, what process is it going to be? Is it going to be more stringent than the current system that we have? Because if it's not, we're still going to see failure for our people.
Thanks. And So a few of you referred to the sort of chaotic process during this summit, like changing the agendas and the invites going out last minute. And I believe Chief Whitford was calling it political theater. Can you talk about that? Do you see this as like a form of negligence on the government's part, or do you attribute intentionality to it? Do you think this was intentionally designed that way?
Sure. I know you mentioned Chief Whitford, but I can. I guess with the summit being called, the chiefs being invited, it goes along the same lines of the consultation being more of a checkbox rather than a full, meaningful and good faith engagement. I guess the other thing that wasn't or was mentioned in the room by numerous chiefs, including Grand Chief McCurdy, was the NRTA. The NRTA, might be historical. I mean, from the 1930s, when the feds offloaded the responsibilities, control over resources. Right there was the first, many of the first failure to consult First Nations on that transfer. And when you look at it in this case, we've asked, myself personally, have asked Prime Minister Carney, when I met him at the First Ministers meeting in Saskatoon, had an opportunity to meet with him. And this was prior to the passing of the legislation of C5, because I was trying to make the point to him that we need to have a meeting with the chiefs prior to this legislation going through. So I went out of my way to try, get that sort of respect. But he did come to Alberta numerous times. G7 happened, as well as the Stampede. And we tried to arrange something, but we had no response. And we came over here. Many of chiefs didn't come, but we felt that if we didn't come, we didn't want anybody else, especially organizations, to speak on our behalf. And that's why we're here. And in terms of this whole process with the changing of agenda, clearly shows that there's no clear direction or oversight on the process. To me, it's almost like it's pretty close to ad hoc in nature. But we know what meaningful engagement is. And we mentioned it to the Prime Minister that we want full engagement. We want him to come to our territories, to sit down with us, to have that full discussion on all our concerns. And there's so many concerns across the board, but these are the ones that are allowing industry. And that was the other thing. We're having a summit here with the Prime Minister, his ministers. But the other missing party to this was the provincial premiers, the provinces, of this discussion, because they're the ones that have their own regulatory process. So how are they going to require the province to comply to this new legislation? Well, we already have long-standing issues with the provincial governments regarding the same issue. So we'll just leave it there. Yep.
We'll go next to Dylan Robertson, Canadian Press.
Hi, thanks for taking our questions today. I don't know who's best to speak to legislation, but I'm wondering if one of you could maybe speak to what excluding the Indiana Act from C5 has accomplished and what else in the legislation specifically should have been done to protect the treaty rights that you're talking about today.
Well, everything boils down to consultation, right? and the duty to consult. And the federal government, the Crown, especially the feds, they have a duty to consult all First Nations on everything. And that's a direct treaty infringement on the behalf of Canada for not consulting us on anything that's being done. A lot of the rollout by the feds, provinces, are what they want. We never gave up anything. Like Chief Watchmaker said, 1931 NRTA, no duty to consult. Direct treaty infringement. They took our resources. We agreed to a depth of a plow. They took everything. Direct treaty violation. There's so much wrong. They can never fix anything that they do. Just continue to make wrongs. Meanwhile, there's no reconciliation being done whatsoever for First Nations. Only mandates by the federal government. The relationship from the Crown to Canada to First Nations, where is it? But yet we sit here and the federal government tries to dictate treaty as it's already written. It cannot be changed. It's written. They cannot break it. Consultation is a huge piece. Look at what happened yesterday. We weren't even consulted about the whole agenda rollout, but yet we came all this way, hoping to have time for our concerns, for our regions, our territories back home, for our people, but yet we were all overlooked. And it's impacting us very bad. Yes, it's good to revenue share, but how do we share revenue from resources that were stolen, that were taken from us illegally, when these resources were all ours to begin with? Our people should be striving. Meanwhile, we have trillions of dollars sitting in the Indian money trust account here in Ottawa. Treaty and the land base, settlements. You know, we never sold the land. If they could prove we sold the land, and they can't impose any laws on us, regardless of what Carney does. He's not the Crown. He cannot override treaty. He cannot impose any laws on us. We have our own sovereign laws. We are sovereign nations. We have inherent rights. And we lead with our sovereignty from each of our nations. Canada does not supersede treaty. Treaty is with the Crown, not Canada. Canada is supposed to honor it. Where's the honor in it? And where's the reconciliation? There is none. Just mandates and more bills coming each and every day. Meanwhile, our people continue to suffer and starve. Lack of education, funding, lack of all kind of resources. Meanwhile, we're building more buildings here in Ottawa that are worth billions of dollars. Where does the money come from for there? Meanwhile, we have trillions sitting in the trust account. It's our money. It's our land. It's all our resources. We're having lawyers now, doctors, police. Our people are getting educated, and we're fighting back. We can't allow Canada continue to push us around. That's why we're here. There's many of us, more than ever before. And we will stand tall. We will gather together if we have to stop this. And we will enforce treaty if they won't. It's the Crown's obligation to treaty and to the land to uphold those promises and not to impose any acts on us that supersede treaty, because treaty cannot ever be trumped. It is written. Right from 1763, 1764, each treaty region signed at a specific time. And those promises were made and should be upheld with anything. And no law should ever supersede any nation, because we already have our own laws. They were written in treaty, especially with the spirit intent of treaty and the connection to the land that we do have. And all the Crown land should come back to us, because that's another treaty violation. Everything's gated up by industry. How do we do what we need to do when there's gates on Crown lands, our lands? We never sold the lands, like I said many times. Yes, we said we would share, but where's the other part? We shared everything, and we got nothing back. Thank you.
Senator Prosper, I'm wondering where you see things going after the summit today. It seems like there's some fairly stringent commentary coming from some of the chiefs. We're also hearing inside the room what seems to sound like a fairly normal exchange that would happen under a different sort of consultation. I guess I'm just wondering where you see Indigenous nations going next after the summit ends.
Thank you for the question. And certainly it's within the rightful domain of those First Nations to take whatever positions they see fit as a result of this gathering, this summit. But I think what is rather key is for government to learn from this exercise. More specifically, with respect to the process that was initiated for C5 and the lack of involvement of Indigenous groups within that, and the lack of a parliamentary process to really consider the merits of legislation and to improve it. I think this provides an opportunity for the Carney government to improve the relationship with Indigenous groups, with First Nation groups, with leadership. Hopefully this isn't a one and done approach that prevents further constructive dialogue to take place. There's a necessary element of rebuilding trust with First Nation groups and with First Nation leadership. So I hope that that is pursued in certainly the coming weeks to months, to build upon that relationship and to improve it, because there are numerous things that can happen in light of from a First Nations perspective. So First Nations people, they want development, they want progress, but they want an appropriate process that respects their Aboriginal and treaty rights. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Mark Ramsey, Toronto Star.
Hi, thank you for taking our questions. Mark Ramsey of the Toronto Star. On a slightly different topic, as I'm sure you're aware, the federal government is looking at making cuts to the federal budget. It's looking at around $25 billion over the next 3 years. And from what you know so far, Indigenous services are not exempt from that. There's a new report today that from the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives that suggests $1 in $5 in those cuts could come at the expense of transfers to First Nations and other Indigenous governments for services. I'm just wondering what your reaction to that is, any of you, especially given this current context that we're here today for.
Comment on that. So we've done some, going back again, it's Chief Phyllis Whitford. Just a quick comment. We've done some research going back several years. So there's a lot of misinformation that goes out to Canadians. In our struggles developing and maintaining relationships with the rest of Canada, part of that is the sensationalism that First Nation people get all the funding, they get all the taxpayers' dollars, and I wanted to set the record where the funding that comes from Ottawa that gets dispersed into First Nation communities across the country, where you're given a certain amount of money. 40% of that money, we're estimating, 40% of that money goes to ISC staff, the infrastructure, the buildings. And then it goes to regions, to provinces. By the time it reaches my First Nation, it's like a tiny bit, a fraction of what has been sensationalized in social media, and that's the truth. I'll give you an example. There was a lot of funding that looked like there was a lot of funding that was given to First Nation schools. I, for one, saw by the time it got trickled down the scope, our school got crumbs. They literally I'm just guessing. So they gave our region $2.5 million. By the time it reached our school, we got $60,000. So when you do the math, and I think that's that piece where I, for one, Canadians are misinformed. They are given information that is so far from the truth. We are that reality, and one of the biggest thing is funding that is out there, because there's miscommunication or they're misinformed. I believe that it perpetuates racism, it perpetuates discrimination, it perpetuates assumptions of First Nation people. And I think that we need to get better at talking about the truths, being honest, giving out what is there. I, for one, am a truth speaker, and I believe that the relationship is predetermined. I heard one of our chiefs said, we come here in honesty, we come here with good intentions, and we will continue to do so. We have to continue to fight for our children and for their futures. Thank you.
Just to kind of add on to that, she was talking about the trickle-down effect. And to talk about further cuts to our nations, we manage poverty as leaders of our nations. And to hear that we're going to be getting more cuts to our programs it's devastating. We are supposed to be sharing resources. We are supposed to be, that's the spirit and intent of treaty, is to share. And as this continues, there's less and less sharing of the land, the revenues. And that should not be. One of my colleagues said, we should be the Saudis of Canada. And I recall there was a person who lived in Saudi Arabia said, yeah, they should be. And we come here and we're talking about free, prior, and informed consent, consultation. That was missed with C5. Do we want to see First Nations in Canada prosper? Absolutely. Absolutely we do. But there's that honor to the treaties. The treaties are alive. When they lit the pipe, I'm going to talk about Treaty 6 here. When they lit the pipe, when they raised the pipe in 1876 in Fort Carleton and in Fort Pitt, it gave life to that treaty, just like the other treaties as well. That's why we sit here today, and we're talking about respecting treaties, honoring treaties. And yes, the government should be getting this right and be honorable towards the treaties. Treaty First Nations shouldn't be managing poverty year to year and it getting worse. Thank you.
Thank you both. Just back on the topic, maybe for Chief Sunshine and anyone else who was at the meeting today, at the summit today, I'm wondering, are you planning to go back or are you kind of boycotting the rest of the summit? And do you feel that the AFN and other First Nations should have rejected the invitation to the summit because it's not a real consultation, as you guys say? What's your thoughts on that?
Again, I'll go back to, I come here in good faith. And that's what our people have been doing since contact. We talk about some of the challenges that our people face. And if I say that the AFN should have rejected the invitation, I don't speak for the AFN. The AFN doesn't speak for me. And you want to talk about all the cutbacks? Well, there's one right there that they could save a lot of money on. There's challenges within that dynamic between the AFN and the Liberal government that we've seen over the last several years. There's times where it's hard to see where the Liberal government stopped and the AFN started. And some of our challenges that we're going through are contributing to that. They utilize that organization to manufacture consent, and I've seen that over this process. AFN setting up meetings for chiefs, forums for chiefs to talk about these types of things, so that for their own purposes. And yet, First Nations are sovereign, like my colleague said. We're sovereign nations. When we got the invitation from the Privy Council, it went to our PTO, our Treaty 8 Grand Chief, and then filtered down to us. That tells me that they're not too serious about engaging with nation-to-nation people, sovereign nations. Talking about about the poverty in our nations. We live in crisis in almost every aspect of our being on reserve. We have lack of housing, poor housing conditions, lack of housing, overcrowding, unemployment rate that is sky high compared to other regions outside of us, just our neighbors outside of us. You know, the opioid crisis they talk about. There was a report out of Alberta Health Services here last year where we're 19 years less likely to live than the average Albertan. And they attributed that to opioids. But it's not just opioids, it's poverty. Why do people get into addictions? They're trying to escape something. They're trying to escape their everyday life and the struggles that they have on First Nation. And that is us. We live in second-class conditions, and we're talking about opportunity, equity partnerships. That is not accommodation. I ask, who are the first people here? Whose country is this? Are we Canadian? That's the conversation that we need to have. You know, those are the relationships that we need to mend, and those are the conversations that we have to have with the Prime Minister. On what is that treaty relationship? The way we understood it. We never gave this land away. We never ceded our standard. We never sold it. We were not conquered people, and that's a misconception. Those resources that they talk about out of Alberta region, where they're talking about trillion cubic feet of gas that they're going to allocate to an AI data center, whose resources are those? When you really break it down, like I said, there's no document that says Alberta owns that land. There's an NRTA that has to be discussed. And, you know, the chiefs all across Alberta region and Manitoba, Saskatchewan, all across Canada, we really need to have those serious conversations.
Thank you. We'll go to Peter Maziriou, please. Hill Times.
Chief Sunshine, I believe you mentioned a while ago you wanted a separate formal treaty table. Could you just describe what exactly that would look like and what it might accomplish?
Again, it's going back to the understanding of treaty. There's unfinished business between the Crown and Canada and First Nation people. When we signed treaty, there was never no discussion about cede or surrender. Yet it's there in bold writing. The only bold text in Treaty 8 was cede or surrender. And yet that discussion never happened at the time. Our ancestors passed on to us. Like I said, they tell us all the good things the treaty was going to give us. It was going to give us health care. It was going to give us education. It was going to give us all these things. And yet, in the treaty text, it doesn't say that. So, you know, history favors the people documenting it. And of course, who documented it. So those are the discussions that we need to have. They have to understand where we're coming from. You know, it's easy to tell them something, and the way I see it, we've been having this conversation for 125 years, and it's the absolute, what I see is absolute refusal to understand it, and thinking that it's going to go away. But after this legislation, after the C-61 legislation and all those things, and we have new leadership coming up, new people understanding what the colonial system was trying to take away from us. They were trying to condition us to become average Canadians. But we're waking up. We have lawyers, we have engineers, we have educated people, and enough's enough. The time is now to have those serious conversations.
And Chief Joey Pete, I think you said that you're not going to allow Canada to push us around. We'll gather together to stop this if you have to. What can you do if, as a next step, if the federal government doesn't change its approach here?
We'll come together like our ancestors did. They did this many times in the past, where they marched right to the doors. And they've corrected what the wrongs that Canada have done in the past. Just like the red paper, right? They made these corrections. They tried the white paper on us. And we came back with the red paper. And we will stand collective. We will march up to the building together, with unity amongst all nations. There's many of us, 644 nations. Can you imagine how loud that knock will be? And who will listen? Who will open that door to fix the wrongs? With Bill C-5 and every other imposed bill on our people.
Thank you. Merci, Miigwech. That was the last question. Everyone had the chance to ask a question. So thank you, Chief. Thank you, Senator. That puts an end to this press conference. Have a good day.
Thank you.